everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Jeannie Zames, and I am Director of Growth Marketing at Alchemer. I'm so excited to be joined by our panelists and my colleagues, Sue Bonzer and Vanessa Bagnato. Sue is Director of Customer Support and has a phenomenal background, having held senior positions focused on customer operations and services within companies like Reed Group and Disney. She specifically targets organizational change directly impacting improved customer service. Vanessa is our Director of Product Marketing and is continuously working hard to solve real business challenges while accelerating the time to value for our customers. She is always looking for ways to take advantage of the Alchemer platform and launch solutions that make an impact, helping customers to experience true return on their investment. We will have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. If you have questions, please submit them via the portal at any time through the webinar. As we come to the close of 2021, it's always that time of year when we all start looking to where things will go in the coming year, especially after almost 2 years of constant business and personal environments that none of us could have predicted back in 2019, unless we happen to be Isaac Asimov or some sort of brilliant science fiction writer. So let's get started. Just a few days ago, Forrester published its predictions that showed very high expectations. Currently, 56% of US consumers believe that companies should have figured out how to handle pandemic-related disruption by now. And 58% expect companies to have marshaled their digital resources so they will be able to better respond if the country finds itself in another public health emergency. Let's get started with prediction number 1. So our first prediction, brand loyalty gets a reboot. A big part of my position here at Alchemer is brand awareness and brand loyalty. Also, I'm a true marketing geek, which I'm very proud of, and it happens to be one of those topics I think about often. I know that since March of 2020, my brand loyalties for both business and personal solutions have changed in some ways pretty dramatically. It wasn't intentional, but it happened organically as my requirements and options changed. We predict that change and evolution in brand loyalty is going to continue into 2022. Sue, why don't you get us started talking about what you've been able to see in brand loyalty?
Thank you so much, Jeannie, and I'm honored to be here today to share two of my passions, shopping and brand loyalty, folded into the customer experience. So based on the data on the screen, we know that 75% of consumers tried a new shopping behavior since COVID started. That includes trying new brands, new retailers, new generics even. And we'll continue these behaviors post-pandemic, which is the data you see on the right of the slide, on the McKinsey graph. We really did think that the pandemic would shift sales, but what actually happened, it shifted consumer behavior. We found that people didn't necessarily stop shopping, but they began shopping online because it offered convenience, which was typically associated with running to the store or going to the brick and mortar stores of our past. But now, interestingly, we've shifted online, or a mix of online and in-store, with many retail establishments offering pickup services for your online purchases. And perhaps more importantly, providers did take safety into consideration as being a top priority, so the public would not have to come into a bricks and mortar store. I mean, just driving around and looking at the malls that are in our communities, they're depressing. Once bustling, many are now desolate. I know in my own neighborhood, we had a Nordstrom that closed soon after the pandemic began. However, Nordstrom reacted by actually having pickup services in another one of their local stores a little further outside the community in which I live. So I think retailers have also had to accommodate how they react to these consumer behavioral changes. For instance, I love the idea of if you're buying eyeglasses, you can upload a picture of yourself to get fitted for the glasses online and then either have them shipped to you or pick them up at your local retailer. Now, we still have the need, as I mentioned earlier, to run to the store. So I think things like pharmacies and things like that, they might have a longer staying power. and we think about just-in-time shopping when we need something and we have to run out for it and we can't rely on overnight shipping, that's where bricks and mortar establishments will remain very relevant. The other thing that's complicated in things in recent weeks and months is the supply chain and shipping commitments. I got an email this morning from something I ordered online that advised me that it was going to be a 6 weeks delay in a 6-week delay in shipping. And not only is the supply chain and shipping shortages, but think about our unemployment rates, how they've affected this whole dynamic. And I think if you think about being a retail establishment and brand loyalty, relationships between companies and shipping fulfillment vendors need to be strengthened. Because I do think that if I can get it faster elsewhere, does my brand loyalty deteriorate or shift? That's a lot to think about. And we may do it, as Jeannie mentioned, subconsciously, but it's definitely happening. Vanessa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic. As we were preparing for this webinar, I was reflecting back, to the start of the pandemic. And I believe we saw an initial pivot in brand loyalty at that time. When the reality started to sink in, the pandemic wasn't going away, our way of life was altered. I think that the immediate reflex with regards to brand loyalty was to help save, your favorite brands, especially though those smaller local brands, like saving your favorite local restaurant by ordering takeout from them. I know I did that, and I think many of us did that. We immediately went local with our brand loyalty, or helping to save any kind of local specialty shop, wine, cheese, chocolate, you name it. I know I did it. But then, as the pandemic continued on and things started to reopen, that's when I think we saw another change in our buying behavior and a willingness to explore more. So, if I ask myself, did my shopping behavior change over the past year? Just like Sue mentioned, the answer is yes. Me personally, I started getting my groceries delivered, and I'd only tried that kind of once or twice, and I liked going grocery shopping, but my behavior has changed, and I just got groceries delivered yesterday. So if I go back, Jeannie, to this, first 2022 customer experience trend, I do believe it's evident our buying behavior and our loyalty to brands altered as a result of the pandemic. And so what brands should really do in 2022 is focus on building backup brand loyalty, because we know as marketers, it's much harder to acquire a net new customer than retain a customer. So just the last tip here is just remember that loyalty does take time to build up, but it's also about the relationships and a personal human connection between a brand and a customer. So really think about how you and your company can focus on building that personal connection with your customers and maintaining it.
Thank you, ladies. That was fascinating. Our next prediction really hits at the core of customer experience. CX has always been critical for companies looking to meet their client needs specifically and grow as an organization. However, that focus has only expanded as a result of the pandemic. In recent history, surveys were typically at the forefront of customer experience. However, especially as a result of the changes in customer behavior, we are predicting that surveys will only be the very first step in effective customer feedback programs. Vanessa, let's start with you on this prediction.
Yep, Jeannie, it's 100. You are 100% correct on this one. Just sending out a survey and asking for feedback does not mean you have an effective customer experience program. It's important, and asking for feedback via a survey or surveys is one step in the customer experience program. Another key step that we're actually going to expand upon more in our next trend will be acting on that feedback that comes in. And that action that you take on that feedback does need to be timely and not months or weeks later. But back on the topic of surveys, keep in mind that a survey captures opinions at a single point in time. So one survey may not be enough for you. As a brand, you need to think about the entire customer journey and all the touch points a customer has with your brand. Because the reality is your customer does not only ever interact with your company at one point. Think about e-commerce shopping. Your customer with e-commerce has at least 3 touch points. Your website experience, were they able to find the information? How was it? Their purchasing, and then the fulfillment or delivery experience. So you should really consider making your customer feedback collected in surveys a part of a larger data set, encompassing not only the entire customer journey, but all of your customer base and all of your different customer segments. Another reason, Jeannie, why I think surveys are not alone an evidence of a customer experience program is because, again, customer feedback data should be correlated with other key business metrics. We see this all the time with our customers. And those other business metrics are going to very much be dependent upon your business model. So it could be engagement scores, sales and financial metrics. So you could start looking at churn and retention with correlated to customer feedback. Or in Sue's case, you could be looking at customer service and customer support metrics against customer feedback, cart abandonment rate, and more. So I think in 2022, we can expect customer experience leaders to invest in, think of data lakes, data warehouses, or other means of collecting and analyzing those larger data sets with customer feedback data. So another thing, a last reminder on this topic is I would expect your analysts to be busy next year, because as more of those data sets become available and you look to combine them, those analytics are going to become more comprehensive.
Thanks, Vanessa. That's such compelling information, especially that information about the integrated data sets and how all of these different data sets are related to each other and help you make a better decision. All right, let's go on to our next prediction. And as Vanessa said, it ties in very closely with this one. We predict that CX teams will shift from focusing on collecting data to acting on data insights. Sue, you always have such great stories from your past experience. Can you share some information on this topic?
Oh, thank you so much, Jeannie. And yes, I can. So I think the thing I've learned over the years, and as Jeannie mentioned at my introduction, I've worked in many industries, and one thing remains solid. Your most important person in your organization is your customer and the people that are delivering the service to them, and regardless of industry. And what I've learned is that customer feedback should never be siloed to one person or one department. One of my past experiences with a major cable provider, in our very large customer service organization, we conducted Net Promoter Score surveys immediately following the interaction. And the supervisor of the call center employee would call the customer back and ask, what else can we do for you to be great? For example, if they said they couldn't get a maintenance truck to come within their time window, we'd send a truck. We would actually real-time reroute a maintenance truck to get to that customer. And that meant restructuring our schedules and the availability of technicians, but it resulted in amazing customer satisfaction and shifted our reputation, if you will, in the community significantly. It's all about the real-time incorporation of the feedback. If you can do anything to change your customer perception, they will become happy and loyal. And I think Vanessa mentioned it earlier, but you can't wait to take action. You've got to prove to your customer base that you're hearing them and that you're making those changes that result in outstanding customer service. And in this example that I just shared, our customers felt heard, and many were shocked. We would monitor Twitter and watch their feedback when we would execute on this. And funny enough, our internal employee satisfaction scores were outstanding. We enabled our team to service the customer. They no longer felt constrained. So it's actually something to consider as you build your model. It improves your return on your investment by reducing the cycle time to resolving your customer issues near real time. And employees feel much more relaxed because they can service the next customer, and so on and so on. There's so many benefits to this. Your attrition will go down. You won't spend time hiring people because you've empowered your employees. Another example is we know that 5-star hotels pride themselves on top-notch customer service. And in my experience, our handbooks were very lean. The basic message was focus on the customer and take care of them. Do what it takes. Now, clearly, you're going to have parameters that measure cost and return on those actions, but it's important to take a look at it. The other thing that Vanessa mentioned was multiple customer touch points throughout your organization. Let's talk about Alchemer and our own customer support Net Promoter Scores. We monitor these scores real time, not only for our support representatives, but our product feedback that we receive in the matter of course. So every week I give our CEO a report on our frontline Net Promoter Score feedback. And anything that has to do with product, I make sure that I get to our product marketing team and reward our internal employees for the great work they do every day. But it also allows us to course correct. And that brings me to my next point. Positive feedback is so important for enhancing what a company does well and for promoting a positive culture. But what about that negative feedback? I think it's more important to understand why customers may turn away, things you might have overlooked, that very important feedback. And you need to collect and measure and then remeasure and then take action. Get in front of the barriers that are preventing you from providing an excellent customer experience. If it's good feedback, make it better. If it's negative feedback, fix the problem as quickly as possible, especially if you're seeing trends. And that's why I think your data analysts are going to be very, very busy next year. Look at all feedback, internal, external, positive, and negative. Another example that I just think is relevant here is for a global entertainment company in my past. We actually had one of our human resources vice presidents walk our live operation and interview and observe our employees real time to understand what was preventing the employee from delivering. The results were astounding. Small, easy fixes with gigantic benefits. It brings to mind a book I read in the past, and I can't remember the title, but it was about 211 degrees. That is hot. 212 degrees is boiling. So 1 degree of change can incredibly change your customer experience. Tiny, tiny changes. So Vanessa, what are your thoughts around this? I know I'm passionate about it, but enough for me.
I love your story, Sue. What I'd like to do is actually show a visual to illustrate what you were just talking about. And as we've been talking about, it's all about this action. And we believe that action is very commonly disconnected or delayed from the point you actually asked for that feedback. So a common industry model that we see for customer experience is you collect the feedback, you analyze the feedback, and then at some point you act on that feedback. So we believe at Alchemer that action needs to be decoupled from analysis. As Sue explained, all of those actions, like rerouting a truck to go service somebody who gave a negative piece of feedback, it's got to be timely. It's got to be personal. So your action, though, should not come at the expense of analysis. So what I mean by that is you can start taking action on feedback from your customers as it comes in on an individual basis, with those examples that Sue spoke to. But at the same time, continue aggregating those results. So then you can take a step back, like Sue said, present it to your CEO and look at those larger macro trends across your business where you can make impacts, both positive and negative. How do you keep the positive experiences continuing? How do you keep the negative ones turned around? But if you don't take that immediate action on individual feedback because you're waiting to conduct that analysis, or maybe for a department head to give you that report, your customer's not going to feel heard. They're not going to feel valued, which means they're going to stop participating in your program. They're going to stop giving you feedback because they don't feel valued. And worst case, they could leave your brand and switch to a competitor. So action is really powerful and more easy to accomplish if you also integrate that feedback into the systems and processes your team use. So take a moment, think about right now, what systems does your customer-facing teams and department use? CRM, a ticketing system. Now, got that in mind, think about, would your employees be more likely to respond to customer feedback if that feedback, literally just popped up into those daily tools and processes so they could respond right within the same tool? The answer is yes. That's what Sue's team does. Feedback comes right back into the ticketing system and they can review that feedback and take action on it. in addition to the analysis taking place. Actually, one other example, Jeannie, before we move on to our next topic, is with a gaming company. This is an Alchemer customer. Just like we capture feedback from our customers, this gaming company has actually integrated their surveys within their games. So they show up as pop-ups right within the game at different stages in their player life cycle. The same company has a very specific initiative around what's called responsible gaming. And as part of this initiative, what they've done, speaking of a system, is they have set up a notification that goes between Alchemer and a Slack message that alerts their responsible gaming play channel if a player has included trigger words in their NPS survey. And what this does is this alerts their support team to actually contact that player personally, timely, and actually take any necessary action in line with the responsible gameplay policy.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I'm going to give Sue a tiny bit of kudos and her team as well, just tied to that whole action and immediate action and the fact that our customers know that. I happened to be back in Sue's area one time chatting with her, and she had just gotten an NPS score back for one of her support team members who actually complimented the person and said what a great job he had done, and that she was actually looking for other things to be wrong and looked forward to having him help her again. And what a different shift to customer loyalty and customer experience. And you could see the person was just beaming as Sue shared that story with them. It was very cool. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jeannie.
All right, for our next prediction, we predict the pandemic increased the amount of digital interaction and automation across both B2B and B2C companies. During the past 2 years, automated grocery store shopping and delivery has become almost the status quo. I'm kind of like Vanessa, and I happen to live in downtown Denver, so I have one grocery store across the street from me and one about 2 blocks away, and I always thought, I don't need to order groceries online. Well, you know what? There are benefits to that I never would have imagined. And that automation has really introduced both a new level of efficiency, and it has become more effective for interactions, both for sellers and for customers. It can be a little controversial, but we predict automation will continue to grow and will be fully embraced by employees during 2022. So let's start with you on this topic.
So, Jeannie, I couldn't agree with you more. Not only is this controversial, but it has grown over the years as automation improves. So fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So let's look at some stats from PwC. So while 60% of people are worried about automation putting jobs at risk, this report shows that in the United States, 52% of respondents received automation training within the past year, and 94% credit the training with improved job performance. On top of that, 63% of workers see automation skills as critical to their career growth. And going on to the next slide, while there's training on automation, at the same time, many business leaders are incorporating training on uniquely human skills. So we know that 59% of AI practitioners reported that their organizations are focusing on process skills like active listening and critical thinking. And I think in my experience, emphasizing to my team that by replacing the repetitive, simple, lengthy processes with automation, it gives them time back that they can give back to customers. Perhaps if you're in a sales organization, focusing on sales opportunities or other interaction that require specialized skills. In another one of my experiences, I had probably 100 nurses on my team. I was in a medical case management environment, and we really wanted to peel our team of nurses away from the more mundane tasks. And we automated many of them and introduced lots of AI into the business model. So our nurses would be available to speak to our customers and use their amazing skills. They're our most credentialed team members, and having them rely on mundane tasks rather than healthcare became a problem. So once we freed them of that, it changed the dynamic and the service delivery model. And people, again, going back to what Vanessa mentioned earlier, felt valued. And I think it's almost as if people are more worried about automation infringing on people's jobs. However, they liked it when they were trained on automation and saw the benefits. So some of the statements we hear often is, it took away the mundane part of my job. And because I'm able to use my specialized skills to service our customers, it makes for a more positive employee experience. They're more inclined to want to help customers. And here's where the empowerment that I talked about earlier resurfaces. In short, empowered employees are able to serve customers and create an outstanding customer experience. So, Vanessa, any thoughts here?
Sue, that is so well said. And I think back to the example that you shared earlier, again, with the cable company, where you're talking about how your department in particular had higher employee satisfaction scores because they were empowered to make a difference, because they saw the result of really impacting customer experience, especially when there's a negative piece of feedback, whether it was routing a truck or having a manager call and say, what can we do to make this right? So I really think there's a connection between automation, employee experience, and customer experience. And so I actually think it comes down to this domino effect, starting with the employees. So as you said, satisfied and engaged employees are more likely to stay with a company and become loyal. Well, those same loyal, engaged employees now are more in turn to be motivated and productive, want to help the business. They want to help the customers, and they want customers to be successful. Thus, they're impacting customer experience. And then if the employees are empowered and actually do impact customer experience, brands will see those customer satisfaction scores and see loyalty rise. So the visual kind of domino effect to keep in mind here is employee satisfaction leads to employee retention. That retention leads to employee productivity. So key here. And now we pivot into the customer experience side. More productive, engaged, happy employees impact customer experience, which then means you're going to see your customer satisfaction increase. And when that goes up, loyalty comes out of it, and out of loyalty actually comes retention. So again, focus on the personal human connection between customers and your brand, which leads to that loyalty, and retention will result. So one last reminder before we move on to our next trend is, and Sue said this so well, what's really key to this domino effect, especially the pivot between the employee side and the customer side, is that employees need to be fully empowered to impact customer experience, regardless of where they are located within the corporate hierarchy. If they're customer facing, they need to be empowered, they need to be encouraged to help customers, and they should be rewarded when they do create those positive experiences for customers.
What great information. I especially love those metrics that you gave us, Sue, about how many people have been trained on automation, and then the corresponding increase in how many of those people saw an improvement in job performance and moving up as a result of that training. That's phenomenal. All right, let's move to our next prediction. When I stop and think about my buying behavior, especially over the last couple of years, I know that this last prediction absolutely speaks to the way I interact, both from a personal and a business perspective. And I think a lot of this came from the fact that most of us, or many of us, work from home for 18 months, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. Our fifth prediction is that B2B will become more like B2C. Vanessa, can you speak to this prediction?
Yeah, Jeannie. Pre-pandemic, I think marketers were starting to see a shift in how customers wanted to access information prior to a purchasing point in time, even in B2B cases. So, Jeannie, I know you can fully attest to this as a marketer, but B2B customers were starting to do a little more research upfront prior to engaging with a company. What I mean by that is, and I think we all do it too, do our online research, ask our peers and colleagues, what do you use? What tool are you using? Then once they've kind of done their initial assessment, they'd reach out to the company and say, okay, I need some questions answered, or I'm ready to speak with sales. So now if we look at some of these stats and a graphic that Jeannie's got on screen, we can see that in fact, digital B2B self-service options are increasing. And according to this McKinsey study, B2B customers who are self-serving, what we call the identification and research side of new suppliers, actually rose in 6 months from 22% in August 2020 to 34% in February 2021. And then now if you shift and look at the third column here, which is the ordering or purchasing section of this graphic, you can see that interactions with sales when it came to placing that order did go up from 20% to 32%, while on the flip side, self-serve remained pretty flat. So what I believe that means is when it comes time to placing an order, we are seeing that even B2B customers are ready to speak with somebody in the sales team. So what does this mean to you as a brand, as a company? It means that you need to pay attention to how your customers want to be served and offering them what they need when they need it. So think of the customer's need rather than pushing what you think or the customer or the company thinks the customer needs. Excuse me. And this reminds me actually of some of my previous experience where I was marketing a B2B product. And this B2B product was sold through different sales channels, but it included e-commerce. And I had to really think about how much information I needed to provide upfront on our website so those customers can make a self-serve decision and purchase without ever contacting us. I would say that the logistical piece of the purchasing and payment process was the easy part. That challenging part was, how do I organize this information on the page? How much information do I need to provide up front to really answer their questions so that these B2B customers can self-serve? And in this case, our target customer was somebody in the field all day. So they actually couldn't make a purchase until the evenings or weekends when really we weren't available to answer their questions in real time. So it was really critical that we provided all that information up front so they could self-serve and make a purchase. And we had to learn what type of information they required by reviewing contact page submissions, phone calls, support questions, so that we could really better empower those B2B customers to make a purchase online. So that was my experience, but Sue, what's yours?
Well, so thank you, Vanessa. And of course, I have another story to share. The pandemic had us living that B2C life, plentiful, content. We had quick service, easy path to purchase, and open access to information. So my personal story is that there was a cooking appliance that I saw online that I wanted to purchase, but it is not a brand you typically purchase in the big box stores. There's a demonstration involved. So I sent an email to the company. I got an email response almost immediately. I was connected with the local salesperson who called me and scheduled a demo over Zoom on my time. And together on this Zoom demo, she made me dinner. And it was about an hour-long demo, and about hour and a half later, she delivered the food to my house in a mask safely, and I purchased that product. So I think when you're ready to interact with your customers, think about what the interaction should look like. Can you take advantage of some of the new technology? Are there time zones involved? Is it Zoom, phone, chat, a combination? Are there delivery resources involved? So I think when I think about this, and this has been something I think businesses have tried to conquer for a while, it's just been taken to the next level with the pandemic, is a focus on the ability to provide multiple channels so customers can be served in the manner that they prefer. Safety is a huge consideration now. And the above example that I just shared, as I shared, it incorporated several channels. So we used email, Zoom, and in-person to close the deal. And while this example is focused on B2C, it could work in the B2B segment as well. So as Vanessa cited above, when you think about buyer changes in behavior, especially now, and how that will continue into 2022 and beyond, make sure you consider the how, what, where, and when your customers are best served.
Thank you, Sue. That was such a great story. And by the way, I love your stories. I have to say this webinar was so much fun to plan. We just had a great time getting together and brainstorming about all these different topics. And DJ, our other person who you're not seeing on screen, who helped us work through all of these things. I hope all of you who have joined us have learned a lot from Sue and from Vanessa. And I hope that you are able to immediately act on some of the different things that you learned as you really start to put together your customer experience programs for 2022. I do want to let everybody know we have an amazing e-guide that you will be able to access. Let's see, it didn't come up. Hang on. Well, we will be sending everybody an e-guide. It looks like we've got a slide hiccup here. And we will be sending everybody the link so that you can connect with that. And with that, let's move to Q&As. You can submit your Q&As via the portal. Let's take a look. Looks like we've already got some good questions. Let me start with the first one. Self-service and personalization are two ways that B2B digital experience is becoming more like the B2C experience. What other trends are you seeing in the market that really signal this shift toward B2C-esque experiences? You want to take that one, Sue?
Sure. So as I think about this, I think just companies being very cognizant of how consumers want to shop. I think, there's a lot of shift in offering different, as I mentioned earlier, channels so that it offers that convenience. We enjoyed that during pandemic, right? It was great to sit in our living room and be able to buy what we needed to buy. Lots of examples shared here today. And I think that as you think about how your buyers want to see your product, offer them different lenses and make sure that you're listening to what makes it easy for them to purchase, either in the B2B or B2C. I think, and again, it goes back to collecting and analyzing and acting upon the feedback that you get. Jeannie mentioned the one NPS survey that we got that reflected very positively on our support representative, but we often see lots of wonderful feedback that I send to our product marketing team about things our customers want to see. And we trend that. And we do all the analytics around the return on investment and making the changes to our product. So again, all of these things are incorporated. I think you just have to change how you think. And if I can say, like, don't be arrogant that you know it, because you might not. You might not.
And Sue, I'll just add, and Jeannie, you and we talk about this all the time. If you're thinking B2B, personalization, self-service, you got to think about the website experience as well. How do your customers see themselves on your website, especially those that aren't yet a customer? You've got to find ways to personalize and make sure that they can identify and see themselves in your company messaging and your website and make that information easy and accessible.
I just one last comment on that, and then we can move on, Jeannie, because I can give verbose. But I think looking at your customer through their eyes and putting yourself in their shoes about what they might be going through. We deal with a lot of various customers here at Alchemer, all different use cases and business types. And many of their use cases and business goals are urgent in nature. So we have to make sure that as we're looking at what their use case is and some of the customization work we do for those customers, taking the cycle time into consideration. And all sorts of examples on that. We could talk about this for quite some time, but we can move on to the next one, Jeannie.
That's great. Here's an interesting question. You talked a lot about the impact on the CX team, the marketing team, and sales. How will other departments like HR feel the impact of, say, shifting from surveys to taking action?
Yeah, Sue, I can kick this one off.
Sure.
Think back to that illustration that Jeannie put on screen that I talked about, where we said, action has been disconnected from the point of feedback, or that action is delayed because of analysis. That same concept really does apply to HR and employee experience. You need to really take a hard look if you're in HR right now and get more frequent check-ins with the employees, capture more of their feedback, but act on it. So don't think that you have to do really long surveys to capture employee experience feedback. Do short pulse surveys, maybe it's 10 questions. Review that feedback as quickly as you can, and then share it back with your employees. Present it in some sort of all hands meeting and say, here's the most recent feedback, and here are the 5 things we're doing to take action on it. And keep doing that, because just like you want your customers to feel heard and valued, so do your employees. So you can use that same concept we talked about, the employee experience, but for employee experience. What do you think, Sue?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's how I've lived my life for my career, is listening to my employees, because especially our frontline customer facing employees, they know what it takes to deliver service. They know better than anyone in the organization. And, you know, when I first got to Alchemer, one of the things I heard was a struggle in a very simple transaction. But somebody had put a process in place years ago that required lots of permissions to serve the customer. And that had been antiquated. There was really no reason we couldn't allow the frontline customer to be frontline employee to be empowered to serve the customer. So we changed it. And there was a resounding audible cheer when we made the announcement, because when they couldn't deliver it because of it that they were restricted from doing, they had to get the wrath of the customer, and that is not a good place to be. It demoralizes your team, it's just never good. So if you can empower your folks, listen to their feedback, you're gonna, and I have lived this, your attrition's gonna go down, your employees are gonna be happier, your culture will improve, and it just makes life better for everybody. Not to mention the feedback you're gonna get from your customers, saying things like Jeannie cited, but also, it was wonderful dealing with Sally. She solved my problem on my first call. That's the kind of feedback that you want to see.
Absolutely. All right. I think we have time for one more question. You talked a lot about showing customers that you're really listening as a way to increase customer loyalty. Do you just have some examples of companies that you're seeing do that really well? And I have an example, if you want.
Yes, you want to tell your story first? Okay.
This was one that was funny. It actually totally changed my buying behavior. As I mentioned earlier, I have 2 grocery stores within about a 2-block walk of me. One of them, and I don't want to damage anyone's reputation, one of them is a part of an extremely large chain, possibly the largest chain in the United States. And another one is one that gets some grief sometimes for whole paycheck, more expensive, not that, that doesn't carry the brand. So Whole Foods is across the street, and then the large one is down the street. So normally we would always shop at the large one down the street. So it was probably 2 weeks into the pandemic. And yes, my husband and I, the empty nesters, had finally reached the point where we were out of toilet paper. So I had gotten up early one morning to walk over, get in line. I had my mask. I go over, and there's a huge line around the block. I finally get inside. There's armed police officers letting people in. There's a woman walking out with a big container of toilet paper, and people are screaming at her and pointing at her. She took the last one. I was kind of horrified, and I was like, I think I'm just going to go home. So as I was walking back, I walked by and I thought, I'm going to give Whole Foods a try. So I walked over, and there was just this really nice security guard in front. And he said, I have to tell you, this is our time for just people over a certain age, which I am not. And I said, well, I'm probably closer to that age than you think. And he said, no. And I showed him my ID, and he's like, I never would have guessed you were that old.
So thumbs up there.
Yeah.
Go on in. And they had a whole shelf full of toilet paper. And it so completely changed my perception. And I felt connected to this security guard, as opposed to people screaming at this poor woman trying to get toilet paper. And it really shifted the way. And I have to tell you, we're pretty loyal Whole Foods customers as a result. So it was a pretty amazing thing. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, you can look to some of the big brands that also shifted during the pandemic. Speaking of automation and staying personal while also not having to engage with somebody, I think back to my grocery shopping online through Amazon, through their mobile app. It was already a pretty darn good mobile app when the pandemic started, but the pandemic exposed some issues with it for sure, and some needs that customers had. You know, I need to have a better sense of, you know, how far away my groceries are. So they added a mapping component. I can now look and it says 2 stops away. Love that. So they definitely took advantage of capturing feedback. They make it easy for me to reorder. It feels more and more personal the more I continue to buy through the mobile app and order my groceries. So.
Yeah, just to wrap us up, I know and I mentioned Nordstrom earlier in our conversation, but I think companies are looking more at consumer buying behaviors, and based on how you buy and what you're buying. I shared this with Vanessa. I got an email from our downtown Denver Nordstrom from personal shopping service. We see that you buy these and this and this and whatever, and it's a free service. And with an offer to gather the merchandise that you need, especially this time of year when people are going to buy a little more. I was so surprised because with a big company like that, you don't even think you're noticed, but you are. Exactly. And so and those things with automation and data analytics are ways that you can pull your customer in without, I mean, obviously there's going to be an investment, but the return is huge.
Exactly. Yeah.
The return is huge.
Again,
and so I think, we got to close, or I could tell 50 more stories, Jeannie.
That's okay. And I will catch you later to get those stories. So thank you to both of you. Let's see if I can get my slide to come up. There we go. So if you want to download the predictions ebook, there is the link. And again, like I said, we will send that out to everybody. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Sue and Vanessa, thank you for all your insights and sharing that with everybody. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you,
everyone.